The basics of a camera. Here's what you need to know to get started. There is so much to learn about being a photographer, and specifically with cameras, with the ginormous menu of options and all the different functions that they have. But do not let that discourage you from getting started. Here are the 5 most important things that you need to start taking great photos today. Hello, my name is Mike Lloyd. I am a professional photographer in Silicon Valley, California. I've been shooting professionally for 12 years and teaching for 10 of those. And when I first got started, I was teaching a ton of these camera basics classes because, one, it was a really powerful marketing tool. Because a lot of these people would buy new cameras around the holidays or summer vacations and have no idea what to do with them. And that may be you. And so they come in and they would take my class. It was about 3 hours long, and I gave them a boatload of information, and we took sample photos and gave them lots of homework and ways to work on all of their skills. And then a lot of them were like, I don't know that I want to learn any of this actually after all, so why don't you just come photograph my family or my kids or whatever? And I booked a ton of work out of it. Plus, it was just fun because I enjoy teaching. And the ones who did end up going on these vacations or getting the most out of their cameras, that felt pretty darn good too. So I'm going to share with you the 5, I believe, most important things to learn with your camera so that you can start taking great photos soon. Number 1 is the aperture. Number 2 is the shutter speed. Number 3, the ISO. Number 4 is your focus mode, and number 5 is RAW versus JPEG. And if you're like, I've heard of those first ones, I don't know about that last one, then cool, stick around, because this one, total game changer as a photographer. All right, so number 1 is aperture. This is by far the most confusing part of the camera for any new photographer, which is why we're gonna do it first. Thanks to Brian Tracy, his book, Eat That Frog. We're gonna start with the tough stuff, and then it's only downhill from here. That came out wrong. We're gonna start with the tough stuff, and then it's only gonna get easier from here. So do not let this discourage you if it seems like a lot. Watch this a couple times, and you'll get it. The aperture is basically the size of the opening inside of your lens. So it's not actually part of your camera, it's part of the lens. And it's one of the settings that you use to control how your image looks. Essentially, the larger the opening, the more light comes through. And if you want less light, you close it down. They're measured in f-stops. So you might see f8, f16, f2.8, or any of the numbers in between there. They're not even numbers. So it's not f1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They are, f3.5, f5.6, f7.1. Why? Because they're ratios. And I'm gonna try not to get too technical, but I just want you to have a basic understanding of this. So let's use a 50mm lens. That is 50. This is the standardest of standard lenses. The focal length of this lens is 50mm. That's what that number means. And that means the point inside the lens where the image focuses is 50mm away from the image sensor, because this will plug onto the front of your camera, and the distance from the sensor to where the image focused in here is 50mm. If it's a 70 to 200mm lens, you're gonna be 70mm to 200 away from the image sensor. That's what that means. Think of your eyeball, right? The light goes in the front of your eyeball, it focuses in the back of your eyeball, that information gets sent to your brain. That's how the lenses work too. Light goes into the front, all the different glass elements focus it at one point inside the lens, that information gets sent to your image sensor. Again, if you have your aperture, which is the opening inside of the lens, set to f10, for example, you would take the focal length, which is 50mm, divide it by 10, and you would end up with 5mm. That is how big the opening inside your lens is. So they're not just rando numbers. They actually do serve a purpose. And if you'll notice, it's written f/10 because it's a fraction. Focal length over 10. Now, if we have f1.8, like what this guy can open, if you take 50 and divide it by 1.8, now let's look at a different one. How about f1.8? Because this can open up to f1.8. So if we take 50, the f, divide it by 1.8, which is the setting in the camera we would set this to, you end up with roughly 28. It's like 27.77. I just did that on a calculator. I can't quite do that math in my head. So the opening inside the lens is now about 28mm across, whereas f10 it was only 5 millimeters across. So the larger the number, f10, will let less light in than f1.8 as we just measured out here. So I know this sounds confusing. You're like, why doesn't the larger number let more light in? Because it's the denominator of the fraction. That's why. Also, your aperture will control the depth of field, which is basically how much of your image is in focus. So we've seen those beautiful portraits where the person's eyes super sharp in focus, but the background is all like soft and blurry and out of focus. That is called a shallow depth of field. So when a very small amount of the image is in focus, that is a shallow depth of field. And when a larger portion of the image is in focus, that is a wide depth of field. I don't know why it's not deep, but it's wide. Shallow and wide. That's the terms we use. Just roll with it. And how do you get the shallow depth of field? You open up the aperture more. So this little guy at f1.8 will have a very shallow depth of field and let a lot of light in. This at f10 will have a very wide depth of field, but not let as much light in. So there's a trade-off. You can't have both a lot of light coming in from your aperture and more things in focus. You have to find that balance. But once you know, okay, this is how I use aperture. I can let more light in, but I would also like to control my depth of field. That is the value of the aperture setting in your camera. So play with it. Take a photo of something at f16 and then at f10 and then f8 and 3.5 or as wide as you can go and look at your photos. Pay attention to how much of the image is in focus and how dark the images get. And that's how you're going to understand the aperture. All right, so like I said, that was the most complicated one. The rest of them are super simple. Number 2 is shutter speed. This is basically how long the image sensor is being exposed to light. Your sensor, depending on what kind of camera you're using, if it's a DSLR, it'll have two, they're called curtains, that'll open up, light comes into the sensor, and then they close. How long that is open is the shutter speed. Or on mirrorless cameras, it's basically just how long is the thing turned on and then it turns back off. And you'll see these as a time value. So maybe it's 1/200. It's 1/200th of a second. Or it could be 1/100. It could be 1/1000. It could be 1/4000. They rarely go beyond I think 4 and 8000. Those are super fast. Or you can leave them open for a long time, maybe 1 full second, 5 seconds, 30 seconds. Or there's bulb mode, which means you trigger the sensor to activate, and then whenever you're feeling it, you just close it again manually. And you can let a ton of light in. So when you see the nature photos of stars that are all streaked across the sky, that is because it is a slower shutter speed that allows lots of light to come in because you're exposing that image sensor to light for a long time. But the stars are your light sources, and as they move across the sky, that's why we see streaks in the photo, because the light is coming in from different points during the time your shutter is open. You're like, cool, but I want to photograph people. How does that relate to me? Glad you asked. Shutter speed controls the amount of light that comes in, but it also controls motion. So if you have something moving in the photo, you want a faster shutter speed. Maybe 1/200, 1/400, 1/1000. So it's a very short amount of time that shutter is activated, and the moving thing in the photo will be totally frozen in time. Or you slow down the shutter speed, and whatever was moving is now a little bit blurry. So you've seen river photos or waterfalls that look like cotton candy because the slower shutter speed allows the water to move through the frame while the sensor is still active. So if you're photographing dancers or athletes doing some kind of sport, faster shutter speed. And if somebody's holding still for a portrait, you can go a slower shutter speed. And if you're using flash, you generally can't go faster than 1/200 or maybe 250 unless your flash has high-speed sync. That's a whole other conversation. So again, play with your shutter speed, go outside and photograph cars going by. And if you've got kids, photograph your kids running around in the backyard at different shutter speeds. Try it at 1/400, 1/100, 1/30, and see what the photos look like. And you will learn which values you need in order to freeze motion and to show motion. All right, number 3 is ISO. This is basically how sensitive the image sensor is to light. The lower the number, the less sensitive it is. The higher the number, the more sensitive it is. Super simple. ISO 100 is kind of like the baseline where we start. That is the lowest that most cameras will go. Nikon can go to like 64, but generally 100 is the lowest a lot of cameras go. And that is going to give you the cleanest image. The higher your ISO is, the more light will be recorded by the sensor at the expense of grain, which is like the sandy dot texture all over a photo, right? We see old photos that look all spotty. We call it grain. That comes from a higher ISO in digital cameras as well. So yes, you can let more light in, but you get a grainier photo, which in photos, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you don't want grain in your photos and you want a more polished, clean look, you have to keep your ISO down, which means you have to control the light with your shutter or your aperture or strobes or something else to brighten up your image. If you're shooting portraits in like commercial fashion, everything is super clean and polished. You can't have a high ISO for those unless it's part of your brand. So decide how grainy you want your photos to be, set your ISO accordingly. Number 4 is focus mode. Generally, cameras have 3 different focus modes: single shot, servo, and a combination of the two, and it could be called a handful of different things, like hybrid mode or something. Single shot means you press down the shutter button, the camera focuses, you take the photo. Every time you take a new photo, it will refocus for that image. Servo mode, or continuous focus, as long as you're holding down that button, your camera will continuously refocus as you're taking photos. So if something is running or moving across the frame, you can focus on that and take the photo when you're ready. Whereas if you do single shot on something that's moving, in that split second time from when you took the photo, or from when you focused to when you took the photo, that thing could already be out of focus. So single shot is great for things that are still, and servo mode is great for things that are moving. So even if you're doing portraits of a dancer twirling or leaping, or you want clients to do a hair flip, use servo mode so your camera can track that. The middle hybrid mode, don't bother because it's not as good as single shot and it's not as good as servo mode. Don't use it. Don't worry about it. Just focus on the two. Servo mode for moving things, single shot for still things. Okay, number 5, this is a game changer. RAW versus JPEG. This is the type of image file your camera will produce. Your cell phone and any image that you see online is a JPEG. Don't worry about what that means. It is just the type of file. Maybe it's a PNG, but again, those are called raster images. It contains a certain amount of data and they're generally small file sizes, whereas a RAW file is a significantly larger image file that holds a ton more data, and you can't share a RAW file to Facebook or Instagram. You can't post them on your website. It is a giant block of data that you will then save as a JPEG. You're like, why would I want that extra step in there and not just take the JPEG? Because a JPEG has 256 color values and a very small amount of data. So if you take a JPEG image and then decide later, oh, I would like that to be a little bit brighter or darker, or maybe I want to enhance the colors a little bit more. Every time you adjust a JPEG image and save it, you are losing data and you already have a limited block of data to work with. However, a RAW file has millions of color values and data points. So you end up with, say, a room size amount of data, and you can pick and choose which of those values you want to export as a JPEG. You have so much more freedom in adjusting how dark or bright an image is, all the different color values, everything, without losing image quality. That's the difference. So once you save that JPEG, you said, I want these 256 values, and I'm going to throw away everything else. They're gone forever. So if you were to adjust any of those things, it's the computer processing that data, trying to guess what you want, and you lose image quality. RAW files, the room size amount of data, as opposed to the cereal box size amount of data, you can continuously modify that and export it as JPEGs as you make all of your edits and adjustments, and you don't lose image quality. That's the magic of it, at the expense of file size. A JPEG might be 5 to 10 megabytes. Your RAW files could be 40 to 50 megabytes, depending on the size of your camera's image sensor. My Nikon Z7, they're 45 megabytes. The RAW files I submit to print are usually 5 to 8 megabytes. So significantly larger, but hard drives are cheap. Memory cards are relatively cheap. Don't worry about that. Just know that you will need more hard drives for backing up, larger memory cards, but it's totally fine. All right, you may want to listen to this one again, because I know I just threw a lot of info at you. Hopefully it wasn't overwhelming. But again, these are the 5 basic camera concepts that you need to start taking great photos. What does your aperture do? What about shutter speed? What is your ISO? What kind of focus mode should you be using? And should you be saving your images as a RAW file or a JPEG? One last note about RAW files. You need editing software to edit them, like Adobe Photoshop or Lightroom, Capture One. I mean, there's a ton of programs out there that will edit RAW files, and then you'll save those as JPEGs, which you can then post online, have on your phone, everywhere else. So you will need actual legit editing software. You can probably find it free online. It's super easy, but just know that that's what you need. And one other tip that will instantly make you a better photographer, subscribe to my channel right down there so you don't miss any more of these videos. If you have questions about any of this stuff, post them in the comments, or even better, head to our Facebook group, which I will link down below as well, and you can ask all the photo questions you want. That's generally where I provide the one-on-one support with anyone in our community. You are amazing. See you inside.